The new deep dungeon Eureka Orthos is out, and whether you're doing it with friends or solo, the first obstacle in your way is that checkpoint locked behind floor 30. But with all the new additions, along with the fact everyone is starting from scratch, it can be rather daunting to get there. So let's try to ease that burden by breaking down those first 30 floors. But before we actually enter the dungeon, there are a few things I want to go over, starting with a nice bit of quality of life. Next to the Aetheryte in Mordona, there is an NPC who will teleport you to the dungeon's entrance, so you don't have to fly there each time you want to go. With that out of the way, let's move to the new Pommanders. There are a total of 3 new ones, and we're going to start with Lethargy. This slows every enemy on the floor, decreasing their attack speed, their movement speed, and even their cast speed, making it very useful if a little scary because the indicators remain for a really long time. Next is Storm. This will reduce every enemy's health on the floor to a single digit. However, immediately after, the enemies will begin to regen their health, so make sure if you use Storm that you're either in combat or about to engage in combat, so they don't regenerate all their health. And lastly is Dread, a new transformation that will combine 2 previous Pommanders into one, those being Rage and Lust. So if you want to use the effects of either Succubus or Manticore, now you have to use Dread. With the Poms out of the way, we move on to the Demi-Clones. These are the replacements for the Magicite of Heaven on High, and instead of floor nukes, they summon NPCs that help you on a given floor. So far, I've only seen 3 versions of the clones, those being Unai, Daga, and the Onion Knight, and each one of them does something different. Unai appears to be more support focused, Doga appears to be more damage and CC focused, and the Onion Knight seems to be a hybrid of the two, providing both damage and heals. And the last new thing of note is the Dread Beasts. Occasionally you'll get the message when you enter a floor that a Dread Beast is wandering about. These are incredibly powerful enemies that can be indicated by a glowing red aura around them. In most cases, you're going to want to avoid these enemies at all costs, as they'll likely one-shot you and they take very little damage. However, if you do manage to kill one, you'll be handsomely rewarded, as they appear to always drop a gold chest, an accursed horde, and most importantly, a 30-minute buff. I've seen this buff be a damage up, a defense, or a regen, all of which are incredibly powerful. These enemies are what I recommend saving your Storm Pommanders for. It's also possible that you could kill them with a Dread, however I haven't tested it, so do at your own risk. And with all that covered, we're ready to start breaking down the floors, but I do have one last note. I did 1 to 30 solo on a summoner, but if you find it too difficult doing it as a summoner, consider doing it as a warrior or another tank. It might take a bit longer, but it's a lot safer. With that out of the way, let's move on to the floor breakdown. Obviously, we're going to be starting at floor 1, and like any deep dungeon, you're going to use these early floors to get levels, palms, and Aether Pool. If you're doing this solo on summoner like me, then you should try to aim for level 68 before the boss, so you have your second shield. Other than that, there's nothing too special about the floors, so let's start breaking down the enemies you need to worry about. The first enemy I note is the Grenade. They use an attack called Big Burst, which is effectively self-destruct, meaning if you get hit by it, you're probably going to die. Now the thing about Big Burst is you won't see the indicator for this attack until halfway through its cast, at which point it's too late to dodge it, so be careful when you see this attack, get away from the enemy. The next enemy to be wary of is one you're probably expecting to be wary of, the Behemoth, who has 2 attacks you really need to worry about, first being Wild Horn. This is going to be a somewhat hard-hitting attack that inflicts a knockback. The knockback is what you need to be worried about. Make sure you're not getting knocked into other enemies. The second attack to be worried about is Ecliptic Meteor, which they'll start to use around 50% health. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what it does. I don't want to know what it does. I'm not going to test it. You probably don't want to test it. Just kill him before he uses it. That's my suggestion. And those are the only 2 enemies you really need to be worried about, so let's move on to the boss. Now, if you're doing this as a summoner like me, I recommend going into the boss with Bahamut. You want the Phoenix Slayer for healing. The first boss is Genkana, and you're going to want to pop a Steel and ideally a Strength. When you're ready, start the fight. Now, the boss is going to begin by doing a couple autos, and then immediately going into its first mechanic, its Shriek. What this attack does is activate some of the Mandragores on the ground, causing them to explode into a circle AoE. Now, this AoE is bigger than the square that they are in, so give it a wide berth. Immediately after, the boss is going to do another Shriek, which is just a repeat of the first one. However, after that second Shriek, you want to pull the boss to a corner. You want to hold the boss in a corner until he starts casting Mandrastorm. This is the next big mechanic of the fight. Once the cast is over, the boss is going to drop a radial on his position. You want to run to the opposite corner if you're a summoner, pop an addle, pop a shield, and wait for the damage to go out. Once that happens, the mandragores on the floor are going to get numbers over their head, and that is the order in which they're going to explode. All you want to do is find the mandragores with the 3 over their head and wait for the 1s to explode. After that happens, move into the 1s, and you've done the mechanic. From this point on, the fight just repeats over and over again until the boss is dead. Now that you've completed the first 10 floors, I need to offer a bit of a warning. The floor 30 boss hits really hard, so you might need to grind some Aether Pool, or at least get some of the dungeon fragments that you can trade for the dungeon potions. Because if you don't have anything else, then they're going to be necessary. But with that disclaimer out of the way, let's move on to the next 10 floors. 11 to 20. Funnily enough, they're significantly easier than the first 10 floors. There's really only one enemy I would be wary of, and that's the Sawtooth. And the only reason for that is, like the bombs in the first 10 floors, they have an attack called Thrash, which is a backwards cleave that the indicator only appears halfway through the cast. Just be careful of that, but otherwise, nothing too dangerous. So let's move straight into the boss, the cloning node. Like any boss, you're going to want to pop a Steel and a Strength if you're a summoner. Again, try to enter this fight with Bahamut rather than Phoenix, and when you're ready, start the fight. The first thing the boss is going to do is shoot out 3 tethers that are going to cause dragons to come into the arena, and those dragons are going to shoot out massive fire cones. For this first dodge, you simply need to stand next to any of the tethered dragons. Immediately after the first dragons finish their attack, the boss is going to tether to the 5 remaining dragons, who are going to jump into the arena and do their cones. To find the safe spot, you need to find the lonely tethered dragon. He doesn't have any other tethered dragons next to him. Once you find him, go to him, stand next to him. After you resolve those tethers, the boss is going to shoot a couple of lasers. These are easy to dodge, and then you're going to enter Order Relay. The boss is going to tether to 4 dragons on one side, and then 4 dragons on the other side. This looks like a lot, but it's actually really easy to dodge. All you have to do is find the 2 lonely dragons. Once the tethers go out, you're going to find 3 dragons that are tethered next to each other, and 1 dragon that is tethered by himself. Next to that lonely tethered dragon is a lonely untethered dragon who's in between 2 tethers. For the first set of AoEs, stand in front of the lonely untethered dragon. For the second set of AoEs, move in front of the lonely tethered dragon. This will be the same dodge for every ordered relay. After this, you're going to have a couple more lasers and then 5 more tethers. This time, it should be 5 dragons tethered together. All you have to do is find the middle dragon and stand next to him. You're going to get another order relay, find the 2 lonely dragons, a couple more lasers, and then 5 more tethers. This is going to be a repeat of the first 5 tether. Again, find the lonely dragon. You're going to have another order relay, a couple more lasers, and then there's actually a new pattern. This is going to be the 4-to-1 pattern. You're going to have 4 tethered dragons right next to each other and 1 lonely dragon. You're going to want to stand between the leftmost or the rightmost dragons in the group, and you should dodge it or have a tough time to adjust. You're going to have 1 more relay, a couple more lasers, and then 1 more new pattern. This is the 3-to-2 pattern. This is easy to dodge. Just stand in front of any untethered dragon. And by this point, the boss should be dead, but if it continues, it's probably just another relay, lasers, and then a repeat pattern. And with that, we move on to the last 10 floors. Now, floors 21 to 30 aren't that bad. There's only 3 enemies you really need to be wary of. First being the Vovir. This is because when they're not aggroed, they'll use a room-wide attack called Bomb Nation, so just be careful not to fight enemies in the same room as them. The next enemy to be aware of is the Lesser Dragon. They use an attack called Swinge. It's a large frontal cone that will one-shot you. Respect the swinge. Lastly is the Ortho Demolisher. The smallest enemy in any of these floors is by far the most deadly. When you get this enemy around half health, he'll start using an attack called Self-Detonation. This is a room-wide AoE that will wipe you. You can line of sight it, however, but just be very careful of these enemies. And with that, we move on to the boss, Tiamat's Clone. Now, as I warned earlier, this boss hits hard, and you really are going to want to use everything you can to beat her. So ideally, you have something like an Unai or an Onion Knight who are going to provide some extra heals. Maybe you're lucky and got a Dread creature buff, but if not, you might end up needing some of the deep dungeon potions to fight this boss because she hurts. And that's not even taking into account her mechanics, which, let's get into them. She's going to start the fight with Creature of Darkness, which shows you her general gimmick. This is going to summon a line of dragon heads that are going to move in a line. All you want to do is find a row that doesn't have a head. After Creatures of Darkness, the boss is going to use either Worm Tail, a middle cleave, or Worm Wings, side cleaves. Now, wherever the boss cleaves, dragon heads are going to spawn. If she cleaves the middle, there will be a complete line of heads down the center. Half of them will go left, the other half will go right. To dodge this, just don't stand in front of a head. Now, if she cleaves the sides, you're going to have half the heads on the left, half the heads on the right. dodge one side, and get behind the head, and you've dodged the whole mechanic. The boss is going to drop random AoEs all over the arena that you have to dodge. After the AoEs go off, a couple of dragon heads are going to spawn and start moving in the direction that you were when they spawned. The boss is going to do this a total of 4 times per Mega Flare cast, so it can be rather chaotic, especially with all the heads. Just remember, they're moving in the direction you were when you dodged, so that might help you. After the final set, you're going to be marked with a chase marker, and the boss is going to start casting away more, at which point the AoEs will start chasing you. Like with Dark Mega Flare, each time one of these AoEs goes off, a dragon head is going to spawn and will move in the direction you were when it was spawned. So, to make this as easy for you as possible, as soon as you get the marker above your head, head to a corner. When the Waymorn cast is about to finish, start heading in a straight line, and by the time that all the AoEs drop, all the heads will be moving in a single direction, giving you the rest of the arena to do whatever mechanics are necessary. After this, the boss is going to do another tail or wings, this time comboed with a creature of darkness, leading to a lot of heads. At this point, the boss is just going to start reusing mechanics until you kill her. And with that, you should have the checkpoint unlocked, meaning you can start farming Aether Pool levels or maybe try to clear the whole dungeon. Now, if you found this guide useful, then consider checking out another one of my guides. And if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.